Welcome to the Minnesota House District 61B Candidate Forum. My name is Vicki Olson. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, but not a resident of Minnesota House District 61B. I'm pleased to be moderating this forum this morning. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization with a long history of providing unbiased candidate and issue information that is widely used by voters, regardless of political beliefs. The views expressed are those of the candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters. The League neither endorses candidates nor a political party. We're holding this forum for voters to hear from the candidates and to compare their ideas. This forum is being held in the studio of MCN 6. A YouTube recording of the forum will be available in its entirety on September 30th. The recording will have a closed caption option available in multiple languages. Thank you to MCN 6 for the production and recording of this event. District 61B, located in southwest Minneapolis, is a Minnesota House of Representatives district that includes all or part of the neighbors of West Bedeh-Makaska, Linden Hills, East Harriet, Lowry Hill East, East Bedeh-Makaska, East Isles, South Uptown, Fulton, Armitage, and Lyndhurst. Both candidates on the ballot were invited to the forum are with us this morning. They are in alphabetical order. Bob, again, Carney Jr. from the GOP, and Jamie Long from the DFL. We thank the candidates in advance for engaging in a respectful and civil discourse. We have a timekeeper sitting in the front row so that each candidate has the same amount of time to respond to the questions. Following the opening statement of 2 minutes, each candidate will have up to 1 1/2 minutes to answer each question and 1 minute to make a closing statement. The timekeeper will hold up a card when there are 30 seconds and 15 seconds left, and a stop sign when time is up. We ask the candidates to finish their sentence and stop at that point. We expect this forum to last approximately 60 minutes. Questions were compiled by question committees of the League of Women Voters Minneapolis and Minnesota and include submissions from communities throughout Minneapolis. Questions were chosen for their relevance to the race in question and have been reviewed to ensure that they are forward-looking, appropriate for all candidates, and not of a biased, hostile, or personal nature. We look for a balance of topics that affect all of us locally in 61B, Minneapolis, and the state as a whole. To get to as many topics as possible, we limit the number of questions in each category. If you feel your concerns were not addressed, please contact the candidates individually through their offices. For the candidate's opening statement, we ask that they address the question, why are you running for the Minnesota House of Representatives District 61B office, and what are your qualifications? Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond. It was determined by drawing numbers that the first candidate to speak is candidate Carney. The order will then rotate. Candidate Carney?
Real good. Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and also Jamie for participating. I'm Bob again Carney Jr., Republican. I have a health issue. I had an amputation of all my right toes. So I've been in a care facility for the last 2.5 months, which has impaired me. While I'm wearing this thing, I'll be going back to lockup after this is over. I'm 70 years old. I'm currently a substitute teacher for both Minneapolis Public Schools and Anoka Hennepin Public Schools. I am enjoying that a great deal. I've had a very wide-ranging career, primarily working as a consultant or contractor in various business projects in the private sector, but have had some experience in the public sector. My first paid job was managing a Republican congressional campaign against Don Fraser. So we go way back on that. One of the things that I want to talk about is some of the challenges that I think Minnesota is facing right now, and in particular, the reality that political parties are very important But as voters, when we vote, we don't know who is going to be the governor when we vote for someone in the legislature. And I believe that there is a real opportunity to have a system of voting that allows people to vote for divided government, so that you can vote for a different legislative candidate depending on who wins for governor. And by doing that, I think we'd have a lot more cooperation between the two parties than a situation where one party dominates everything, as is currently the case. I don't think that Minnesotans want a unified government. I think we want to have voices from both parties, and this would be very helpful going forward. I'll be talking about this more.
Candidate Long?
Thank you so much. Well, first, want to also thank the League for putting this forum together and for the important work you do to try to help educate the public, and for the important work you do at the Capitol on democracy issues as well. So I'm Jamie Long. I'm the current representative from District 61B in Southwest Minneapolis and running for my 4th term. I have run for office many fewer times than Bob, but I do have some more elected experience in terms of the 6 years that I have served in the state house representing this district. Prior to my time in the legislature, I worked as a congressional aide for then Congressman Keith Ellison, and worked in Congress as an energy policy expert. In my time in the legislature, I chaired the Climate and Energy Committee, and I also have been elected the majority leader by my colleagues, so I'm the number 2 position in the House right now.
Thank you. As we move to the questions, the candidates will have up to 1 1/2 minutes to answer these questions. We'll begin with Candidate Long. The first question is in the category of legislative process and government. What is the one bill you would like to pass in the upcoming legislative session?
The one bill, well, there are many bills that I would like to pass this upcoming session. I think that this past session we had one of the most successful in the history of the state. We passed a bill that I worked hard on to move our state towards 100% clean energy. We enacted gun violence prevention legislation, historic funding in our schools, paid family and medical leave, earned sick and safe time, and many more. So we, I think, had some incredible accomplishments the last 2 years, but there's still work left to do. I can't just pick one, but I will name a couple. One is that I believe we need to do more investment in childcare and early education. We have heard in my district that folks are facing unaffordable childcare costs, and that can really make a tough choice for families about whether they're going to be returning to work or having someone stay home. I also think that we need to do significantly more in healthcare spending. I have been the lead author on a public option bill for Minnesota to allow anyone to buy into Minnesota Care. And we took an important step the last 2 years, and I'd like to make sure we get that done, which would be significant for Minnesotans to be able to have more affordable health care options. And finally, I've done a lot of work in the democracy space and introduced a bill last session to move to nonpartisan redistricting, and worked closely with the League on that. So those are 3 I'll mention.
Candidate Carney?
Following my opening statement, I would like to introduce a bill that gives the voters the option to vote for legislative candidates contingent on who wins the race for governor. So you can vote for one legislative candidate if a Democrat is elected, and you can vote for another legislative candidate, presumably of the other party, if a Republican is elected. The point is that I think that Minnesotans should have the opportunity to explicitly choose divided government, and to say, in effect, we know we have 2 parties, and we want these 2 parties to work together. This is also an opportunity to establish a Republican Party in Minneapolis that is more moderate. The Republican Party in Minneapolis right now, unfortunately, just competes for seats, votes at the margin for the governor. And we ignore legislative districts. We've given up on them. We need to have 2 healthy parties and we need to have cooperation and dialogue between parties. So this is the bill that I would like to introduce. Thank you.
Our next question is, what strategy would you employ to help move the legislature towards more bipartisan problem solving? Candidate Carney?
Well, of course, I've already answered that. Again, building on it, I think it's really important to have two parties that can work together. And I think we also need to acknowledge that it's not healthy to have only one party in the core cities. This is a nationwide problem. So I think that we're going to have political parties that accept the fact that if you're an urban Republican, you are going to be significantly different from a rural Republican. And this is simply an attitude that I think we have to encourage. I'm in favor of encouraging going back to the core idea of a Republican form of government, which is representation and cooperation and working together of the three branches of government. We need to work together, and this is the legislation that I've proposed.
Candidate Long?
Thank you for the question. I think that the polarization of Minnesota residents and voters is a big concern of mine, and I do think that we can do better at the Capitol to try to help bridge divides and bring people together. I think two examples I'd give. One is the work on nonpartisan redistricting, where I think in Minnesota we have a tradition of having the maps be drawn by judges, but that is not the requirement. And we've seen in other states like Wisconsin, where once a party had full control after a decade census, there was a political gerrymander, and it's resulted in real animosity and partisan tension in that state for many, many years. So I think we can head that off in Minnesota and make sure that our elections are fair. And I think if our elections are fair, we're going to have representatives who are closer to the district, less likely to be on the extreme end of the partisan spectrum. And then at the Capitol as well, I have been working to try to help reform our debate and legislative process to put time limits on debate. Right now, there is an incentive for the minority party of either party to filibuster and talk as long as they can to try to gum up the work of the majority party. I think if we put in time limits, that would allow us to move more individual bills where people could have more debate and discussion and work on a more bipartisan basis.
As a member of the legislature, what measures, if any, would you support to reinforce or ensure voter confidence in our elections?
Well, that's a good question. We, I think, did a lot of work the past 2 years and to try to help improve our democracy. One thing I'm very proud of in Minnesota is we have the highest voter turnout in the country. We have a very engaged electorate in citizenship, and I think that's a point of pride for our whole state. But we can always make it better. There are always folks in 61B who don't vote for one reason or another, either because they think that they have to register ahead of time, they might have moved from out of state, and we need to make it, I think, easy for everybody to participate in their democracy. So I've been very supportive of the work that we did on automatic voter registration to get more people on the rolls and make it easier for them to vote, and also have been very supportive of our work to help young people vote. So having folks be able to pre-register when they're 16. When I go to Southwest High School in Minneapolis, I know that our high school students are really enthusiastic about that and have done a lot of work to make sure that their peers are registered, that they know how to vote. And so I think we can continue to do good work along those lines.
Candidate Carney?
I think the real key issue is to have the ability to audit votes, and that says paper ballot. So I think that we need to have paper ballots as the exclusive means of voting. And beyond that, I think we have to have an audit trail that shows where ballots are stored, how they are protected from any kind of interference. I'm in favor of having shorter periods of time for voting. I think 1 week is certainly reasonable. But we need to have a situation where everybody knows where ballots are, everybody knows that they are secured, and everybody knows that every ballot is a paper ballot, so you can go back and look at them. I think these are the key elements to increasing confidence in our system.
There have been several high-profile accusations of fraud and waste in Minnesota programs that distribute resources to vulnerable populations. What would you do, if anything, to ensure better accountability and oversight? Candidate Carney?
This has obviously been a huge problem. We have had hundreds of millions of dollars that have been lost to waste and fraud. Part of my concern is that I think there's been a reluctance on the part of the administration to be proactive and vigilant in ensuring that this kind of thing does not happen. But we have to also recognize that we do have a wake-up call now that we have not had in the past. So I think the key issue, first of all, is that everything is passed and established as spending by the legislature. But once that happens, we have to have better audit, nonpartisan audit procedures to ensure that all money is spent properly, and that it is. We also need to be able to review any organization that accepts money and establish criteria where people can't participate in those organizations if they have a history of fraud.
Well, we took a number of steps at the legislature these past 2 years to ensure that fraud is being rooted out and that we are spending the Minnesota taxpayers' money effectively. We certainly know that confidence in our government can be undermined if there are instances of fraud, and the vast majority of money that our state government is spending is going to the intended purposes. But we certainly know there have been a couple of high-profile examples where that's not the case. What I will say is that in those instances, the state government has done the right thing. They have forwarded information to federal investigators when appropriate, and we see people going to jail. So that's what should be happening, is accountability for instances of fraud. But we took important action at the state legislature to ensure that we were establishing new inspector generals in agencies that were caught up in some of these criminal activities that individuals were engaging in. And we've also, I think, continued to make sure that our independent function with the Office of the Legislative Auditor is doing important work informing the legislature about how we can improve our audit functions as well.
What is the role of the Minnesota legislature, if any, on foreign policy issues or events? Okay, Candidate Long.
Really, we do not have a direct role in foreign policy in the state legislature. I used to work in Washington, D.C. in Congress, and that is the level of government that has direct oversight over foreign policy. On occasion, there are important foreign policy issues that folks in the legislature want to reflect on or make individual statements on. But as a body as a whole, the work that we do at the state level is focused on Minnesotans.
Candidate Carney.
In general and in principle, I agree with that. But I think we need to take note of something that is going on recently. It's an emerging issue, and that is the huge millions of people that are coming into the country illegally and by abusing our system, such as it is, hardly merits even the term of being described as a system. But we have a situation right now where apparently there are about 20 million people that have come into the United States from other countries, and a lot of these are criminals. They're, again, you hear the whole Republican talking list. I won't go over it, but it is a huge problem. And it is resulting in crime in our cities throughout the country. New York is having as much of a problem as we are having. This is a foreign policy issue, and it has to be dealt with at every level of government by ensuring that people cannot come into the country illegally, and that we're going to deal with this situation of illegal people in the country.
Okay, we're going to change it up a little and do a lightning round. So this is just a yes or no question. We're still in the same category of legislative process and government. And we'll start with candidate Carney. So the question is, do you support a bill in which ranked choice voting is expanded statewide?
Yes.
Candidate?
Yes.
Okay. For our next question, we're going to change categories to economy. What will you do to support an economy that makes our state attractive to people and businesses? Candidate Long?
Sure. Well, I think our state is doing really important works in this area. We have an entire Department of Economic Development that works directly with business owners and folks who are creating businesses and helps them support and expand that work. I think that we can continue to do work to help support small businesses in the state. We established some new grant programs this past session to help out with small business owners as well. But I think what I hear from the Minneapolis Chamber and our local folks is that a lot of what they are looking for is help for their workers. And so that includes having a good public transit system so that their folks can get to work. It includes having affordable childcare so that they can choose to work and not have to stay home. It includes having affordable housing so that workers have a place that they can afford where they can live close to their jobs. And so I think all of these things are investments that our state can make that make our small businesses and our large businesses more competitive and allow our workers to attract new people to the state who want to live here and call the great state that we have home.
Candidate Carney?
I'm in favor of taking a kind of a continental view of this. Take a look at where Minnesota is. We are right at the center of North America. And the entire region to the north and to the west is characterized by almost no population, but huge amounts of resources. So what we have in Minnesota is a series of relationships, business relationships, that have been built through over a century of working with communities that are to the west and the north of Minnesota. And I think that we ought to concentrate on strengthening those relationships and on encouraging people in that part of the North America to strengthen their economic ties to Minnesota and to look at Minneapolis and the Twin Cities as a communications and business hub. I think this is a tremendous opportunity to properly develop the resources that we have in an environmentally responsible way.
Where do you see funding coming from to support the 2024 Minnesota legislative agenda? What, if anything, would you be willing to give up? Candidate Carney?
I'm very concerned about this. You know, we had an $18 billion surplus that's been spent. We have a significant amount of additional taxes beyond that. So we're in a situation right now where we've established a new tax baseline. And I'm not even exactly sure where it's at. We've had a huge disruption economically with COVID. We had $18 billion of federal money that came into state and local as a result of that. So our entire balance between federal, state, and local spending has been disrupted, and we have a gigantic increase in our overall tax burden. I'm very concerned about that, and I think we need to study it more, and we need to figure out ways to reduce the total spending because I don't think that we're at a sustainable level right now. I think with the tax burden that we currently have in the state, people are going to be leaving the state. This is an issue that's going to be emerging.
Well, we, in the past session, passed the largest tax cut in state history, and that included tax breaks for individual homeowners who are seeing their property taxes increase. It included tax breaks for seniors who are on Social Security. And we are ranked among the best states in the country in terms of progressive taxation. And I think that should be the most important focus point for us in terms of any new revenue, is making sure that we are not burdening those who can least afford it. And we've seen a number of other states, particularly Republican-led states, that have flat taxes. You've heard proposals from Donald Trump for a nationwide sales tax. Those are regressive taxes. What we want to see are progressive taxes, where individuals who can least afford it are contributing the least, and those who have been the most fortunate in our state are contributing the most towards the important functions of state government, including our transportation system, our education system, and our healthcare system. The investments that we make at the state level are critical for the economic success of our state. If we're not investing in our schools, for example, then we're not going to have future workers to grow our economy. So we need to make sure that we are making smart investments that are going to continue to help Minnesota grow and improve.
So changing categories now to housing. Housing continues to be an issue facing our state. How do you propose to increase the availability of and access to affordable housing for all? Candidate Long.
Well, we invested $1 billion in affordable housing this past session, which was one of our largest investments, and that's because we are seeing a real crisis, both in Minneapolis and across the state, in availability of affordable housing. And you don't have to look too far to other states to know what could be ahead for us if we aren't getting ahead of this challenge. We see a number of our sister regions that people are priced out of living there. So I think that we need to continue to do more work in this area. It's a high priority for me and for the Democratic caucus. We need sustainable funding, not just one-time funding for affordable housing. And we need to make sure that the affordable housing is being built across our state in all communities, not just concentrated in particular cities or particular regions. We also need to build a wide range of housing, whether that include supportive housing for those with chemical dependency and mental health issues, shelter housing for those who are coming out of challenges with availability of finding housing themselves, and also protecting our naturally occurring affordable housing that we have in the state. So there's much work that we need to do, and this is, I think, going to be a high priority for me and the caucus next session.
Candidate Carney.
I think one of the tremendous opportunities that we have is to start building housing over major transportation arteries, and this includes freeways and major roads. First of all, that is where our network of transportation and transit is concentrated. If we want to have people use transportation and transit in particular, let's put their houses above transit lines. Beyond that, when we build above these arteries instead of on land, we in effect are producing land, artificial land. It's up a story or two, but we can do a lot more to make use of these arteries, which are by and large not efficiently used at all. If we concentrate on developing an effort to combine housing with multi-level spaces, including green spaces that are above transportation arteries.
Underfunding of public housing authorities throughout Minnesota to address repairs is a chronic issue. For instance, the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, MPHA, has an estimated $229 million capital backlog, and a group of lawmakers are asking the state for $35 million to help make up badly needed repairs. What could the legislature do, if anything, to address the backlog? Candidate Kearney.
This is a technical question that I frankly don't feel particularly qualified to address. More generally, I think we need to find ways to build public housing along the lines that I've described, which mitigates the requirement for land by building above transportation arteries, which integrates our development of transportation and transit resources with housing. I think that is the preferred approach that I would like to advocate. But this is a technical and detailed question that I don't feel further empowered to go into because of lack of knowledge.
I do support the proposal. I agree that we have a significant underfunding of our public housing authority that has certainly been exacerbated by the federal government and their lack of funding towards public housing in general. And public housing is a very important asset in our city in Minneapolis for making sure we have affordable options in 61B, where we do have public housing units and across the city. So we have certainly seen that there is an ongoing challenge for capital improvements for public housing. And if we value having affordable housing in our communities and being able to have everyone live in a home, which we know is better for kids who are going to school, better for education, better for getting access to jobs, that really is the foundation for so much else of our families being able to succeed in Minnesota, then we need to invest in that and make sure that we have safe and sustainable funding for our housing.
Our next category is public safety. Many are concerned with the crime and gun violence in our communities. What legislation or specific ideas do you have to respond to residents' need for safer communities? Candidate Long?
Well, this is an important question and certainly one that I've heard a lot from our residents in 61B. We have seen crime come down over the last few years, but I think that we can all agree that it's still unacceptably high. I used to serve on the Public Safety Committee before I was elected to Majority Leader and did a lot of work in this area. The past 2 years, we had significant investment in our public safety in Minneapolis. We got $30 million towards the Minneapolis public safety efforts that the city can use as it chooses to make sure we are supporting public safety across the city. We also passed important gun violence prevention laws, including requiring universal background checks and red flag laws for those who are a risk to themselves or others to have firearms temporarily removed. These are supported by vast majorities of our residents in 61B, and I know will make our communities safer. And we have to continue to do this work. I think that we also need to make sure that we are looking at ways that we can help deal with some of the problems that our police are not best equipped to handle. And that includes mental health. We've seen co-responding work very well in the city of Minneapolis, where we have mental health responders going to calls when they can. And I'd like to see us continue that and improve it.
Candidate Carney?
We have a huge problem in our society in that we do not effectively remove people who are dangers to other people. I think that we need to start developing new technology and new approaches to restricting and confining people who have done something that proves that they're dangerous. And I want to suggest two approaches in particular. Number one, straitjackets. I think we need to develop technology that allows people to walk around in a straitjacket so that you can be, for example, in the Minneapolis Skyway system, but that you are visibly constrained by the straitjacket and unable to harm anybody. Second, I think we need to start converting our urban areas into prisons. I think that we need to have spaces of about 100 square feet where a person is going to be able to live and where they're going to be able to be expected to go to work in that urban area and pay their way, so that we do not have people who are being incarcerated as an economic burden on the public. We need to really start looking at some very radical solutions for preventing people who are dangerous to other people from harming or threatening them.
On the topic of climate, changing topics here, what are you going to do as a state legislator to ensure that your community is protected from significant environmental issues such as water, air pollution, urban heat islands, etc.? Candidate Carney?
And I missed the first word. Was there a word toilet in there at the beginning?
Climate, I think, was the
Climate.
word.
Climate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the environment, one of the things that I'm working on is a system of transportation that allows vehicles to receive energy in small units that is delivered to the vehicle from above as the vehicle is moving. So, for example, you have a car moving along, you can deliver supplies of battery power or hydrogen gas or conventional fuel to that vehicle. You can also capture the carbon dioxide that vehicle emits, and you can recycle that carbon dioxide into hydrocarbon fuels. So we need to start rethinking how we supply energy to vehicles and how we can capture the carbon dioxide that is emitted and recycle it. If we take this approach for transportation, I think that we can eliminate the problem from carbon dioxide and global warming.
Well, this has been a top priority of mine across my career, and I chaired the Climate and Energy Committee in my second term in the legislature. I was also the author of our 100% by 2040 clean energy bill, which is one of my proudest accomplishments, and we have much more to do in this area going forward. We have more work we can do to help expand electric vehicle access in our state, including building out public electric vehicle infrastructure and helping support individuals in being able to own electric vehicles. We also have more work that we can do in the building space. We've passed some new standards for new construction for buildings to make sure that they are increasingly energy efficient. But we also need to make sure that we're dealing with our existing buildings and trying to reduce their carbon emissions over time. So I think that we have significant more work that we can do at the state level in the building and climate change space, and I know that's going to be a high priority for us next session.
On the topic of transportation, what, if anything, would you do to continue building a transportation system that is accessible and safe for users of all abilities and income in Minneapolis and throughout the state? Candidate Long.
Well, we need to make sure that we have a transportation system that is multimodal, that allows for all types of users, whether that's individuals who need to rely on buses to get around, or folks who are driving to work, folks who are walking to school. And I think that the state has made really important strides in this area. We finally have sustained ongoing funding for transit in our metro area with legislation that we passed this past year, and that is making it possible for us in Southwest Minneapolis to have access to new bus rapid transit lines that are getting built. We also have a new light rail line that is coming very close to District 61B, and these are important assets for our region. We know that regions that have invested in their public transit infrastructure are able to continue economic growth, and that people enjoy living in those regions more and will seek out and live in those areas more. We also need to make sure that we're investing in our road and bridge infrastructure and keeping it safe. We have a bridge not too far from our district, the Nicollet Avenue Bridge, that needs significant repair and was a top priority for the bonding bill that didn't get passed this past session at the state level. So we need to continue to work to make sure that we are improving our existing infrastructure as well.
Candidate Carney.
One of our major opportunities for transportation is to start developing automated vehicles that do not require a driver and that can be dispatched to pick up and transport people to wherever they want to go. Now, I've already described this system that can capture carbon dioxide and can eliminate our pollution problems. And this should be built in as part of that. But I think the real key for transit is to develop a system that is based on small automated vehicles that are dispatched for individuals. Let me throw out a couple numbers here. Right now, when you take state, local, and federal funding together, we spend about 37% of all of that money on so-called transit. we get 1 to 2% of all rides in the metro area out of public transit. Economically, our system is a disaster. It's obsolete. It is 19th century technology at 22nd century prices. We need to move toward automated vehicles as a system for transit.
On the category of education, our K through 12 schools are facing a number of challenges such as funding, policy, curriculum, high absenteeism, and declining test performance. What do you believe the legislature can do to address these issues? Candidate Carney?
I think that the principle of a choice and the opportunity to be able to have your child go where you would like to go, including both public and also private and charter schools, is in principle the best approach. Now, we understand that there are very serious problems right now, especially with charter schools, and this needs to be addressed. But I think that the fundamental issue that we need to concentrate on, and again, I am a public school substitute teacher right now, so I have experience in this on a daily basis, that's seen what's going on both in Okehennepin and Minneapolis. A lot of tremendous work is being done, but I think that we need to have choices and flexibility for parents to decide how their children want to be educated. I think we also need to concentrate on paraprofessionals. The impact that they have on students who need more individual attention is just incredible. That's what I've observed.
Well, I think the investments that we make in our schools at the state level is one of the more important things that we can do as a state government. And we certainly, unfortunately, have underinvested in our schools over the last couple of decades. We used to have a school system that I think was a national pride, and I think that we've seen that slip. And we, in particular, have seen that slip for students of color in our state. And we know that there are huge divides in terms of the opportunity gap for our students based on their race. And we need to do a better job in educating all of our students and making sure that everyone has an education that can succeed and get them prepared for their careers. We, in this past legislative session, did some really important work in finally indexing to inflation the school formula so that our school districts are not playing catch-up every single year and losing ground in terms of the investments that they're able to make. We know that Minneapolis Public Schools are facing significant budget challenges, and we were able to bring an additional $30 million back to our Minneapolis Public Schools to help alleviate the budget crisis that they are facing. It's certainly not going to be enough alone for the work that we were able to do, but we need to continue to do that. We also need to continue to support our teachers and the important work they do and our students in improving their performance and literacy. We passed the READ Act this past year to help make sure our students can read better, and that was an important accomplishment as well.
On the topic of equity and inclusion, do you support creating a ballot initiative for the National Equal Rights Amendment? Why or why not?
Yes, I absolutely do. It was a top priority for us this past session. Unfortunately, we weren't able to reach full agreement on the language, but I'm hopeful that we can come back and make it a high priority this next year. And I think that all Minnesotans can agree that we should have fundamental protections for equal rights and prohibitions against discrimination in our Constitution. We have them right now under our state law, but not in the protections in our Constitution. And I think that we've seen that this is a very popular measure across the state, and in other states that have enacted it, when it's been on the ballot, voters want to support it because it is a very basic tenet of our core democratic principles that regardless of your race, gender, identity, you should be treated fairly. You should not be discriminated against in Minnesota.
Candidate Kearney?
Now, I'm assuming that this does not refer to a potential nationwide referendum of any kind that this is restricted to the state. I have a conceptual problem with this, and the problem is that you are trying to define this in legislative terms, which inevitably I think have to be broad categories. And so I see it potentially as an invitation for the launch of a lot of different lawsuits that are making claims, which I would expect in some cases would be extreme claims, as to what the terms that would be introduced are going to be. That is my biggest problem on this. In terms of being fair and having equity and inclusion, I see a lot of it going on today. I frankly don't see it as nearly as much of a problem in the experiences that I have teaching students in both Anoka and Minneapolis Public Schools than it is let out to be in the media. I actually think overall that the education system is doing a pretty good job on this. That's my own perception, what I've seen.
In the category of health and wellness, mental health issues are a concern across our state and show up in a variety of settings: schools, housing, public safety, etc. What can the legislature do to address this? Candidate Kearney?
This frankly builds on the previous answer in the sense that that we are trying to define things in legislation that are essentially, at best, medical issues that should be left to medical professionals. I have a concern in general concern with defining things in legislative terms that are going to try to control what medical professionals do. And that, I think, is my best effort at answering this question. I'd rather rely on the judgment of medical professionals than the vocabulary scalping of legislators. Sorry.
Well, mental health is certainly a very significant issue and one that we hear a lot about in Southwest Minneapolis. What I'll say is two ways that I think we can do better to address this. One is that reimbursement rates for mental health care have not kept pace with reimbursement for other forms of medicine, and we need to change that. Senator Paul Wellstone was a huge champion on mental health parity at the federal level, and I think that we need to continue that work at the state level to make sure that we are increasing reimbursement rates. We started in that direction this past session, but we need to continue to do more. I've also heard from students in our district that mental health is the biggest challenge that they face in their schools. And unfortunately, we have one of the lowest student counselor ratios in the entire country. So we are not serving our students well in terms of access to mental health services. We took some important steps this past session to increase access for student counselors and other mental health professionals, but we need to do more to make sure that our students are getting the services they need and that they can focus on their learning and succeeding at school.
So we're just going to cycle back to the economy for one more question. What are the biggest economic challenges in your district, and what do your proposed legislature do to address these challenges? Candidate Long?
Well, I think we're hearing from a lot of Minnesotans concern about prices and cost of living. We have seen inflation coming down and a lot of the economic pressures come down, but it's been over the last few years, certainly inflation has been a challenge. And for anybody who's gone to the grocery store recently, they know that this is really something that's hitting a lot of families hard. I think there's a lot that we have done, but more that we can do. And I'll focus on three areas of costs. First is healthcare costs. I hear a lot from our constituents about the rising costs of prescription drugs, about their inability to afford affordable insurance. And I think we can do a lot more in both of those areas at the state legislature. Child care costs, I've talked about a couple times tonight, but those are costs that we know a lot of families are facing. And I'd like to see us get to a point where we have no more than 7% of any family's budget going towards childcare, which is the national standard for affordability for childcare. And I'd also like to see us do more in housing. We know that housing costs for many families are unaffordable and one of their largest expenditures. And I'd like to see us expand what we started to do in allowing families to have vouchers so that they can take their assistance to an existing rental unit and make sure that that is one that is affordable for them. So I think that's a way to use our existing housing stock to help bring down the prices for Minnesotans.
Candidate Carney?
In terms of our district, the district economically and statistically is better off than a lot of districts. And I don't think we ought to lose sight of that. So that's a blessing. But I agree with Jamie that the housing costs in particular are a huge problem in this part of the Twin Cities. And the solutions to that, I think, can also be vouchers and doing some of the things that I was talking about earlier in terms of housing, especially developing new housing units above arterial transportation. I would like to suggest something else too, and that is that I think that when you look at the whole metropolitan area, we need to not lose sight of the fact that there may be better opportunities to help people economically by helping them live further out than rather so close to the urban cores. And this especially is becoming more practical as we can do more and more work remotely.
So we have time for one last question before closing statements related to personal background and experience. How do you plan to listen to, communicate with, and tap into the knowledge of your constituents? Candidate Carney?
Well, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I would plan on simply putting together a schedule of being at specific locations at specific times and inviting people to come and talk to me and giving them the option to talk, by phone if they want to, if they don't want to come in person. But I think that the key to this is simply to put together a list of times and places where we make ourselves available to talk to people and invite them to come and talk with us. Beyond that, I think some kind of a system needs to be constructed to follow up on the ideas that they come up with. Without trying to elaborate that, I think that's the core of the approach that I would take.
Well, we have a very active constituency in District 61B, and we have some of the highest mail contact and phone contact of any district in the state, which I'm very proud of. And we are very responsive to our constituents. I read the emails that are coming in to me and listen to the voicemails as well. We are accessible at the Capitol. I meet with tons of constituents who come up to meet with us during legislative session. But then we also are active outside of session, hosting town halls, which are very well attended. I often attend neighborhood meetings in our district, both their annual meetings and other events to meet with constituents. And I'm frequently available in the community visiting some of our schools, visiting with constituents who are doing important work that they want to inform me about and try to influence what the work is that we're doing in the state capitol. So we have an incredible group of constituents in 61B with a lot of experience and expertise, and I benefit every day from their knowledge and what they share with me.
So we'll move on now to closing statements. Candidates will now have up to 1 minute for their closing statement. Candidate Long.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Bob, again for a good discussion. And it's been really the honor of my lifetime to be a representative for this district in 61B. I would be incredibly grateful for the voters to send me back to a fourth term. I think that we have done work that the district can be very proud of over these past 2 years. We've had a historic session in terms of the investments that we've made in our community, some of the protections that we've made for our citizens. And I want to continue that work at the state capitol with you all. We have more work to do on climate. We have more work to do on making sure that we're protecting and investing in our students. We have more work to do on affordable housing, on childcare, on healthcare, and much more. So I look forward to doing that work with you all and to continuing to engage in the weeks and months ahead.
Candidate Carney?
I also want to thank the League of Women Voters and Jamie for participating in this. I think it's been a good discussion. I would like your vote for the legislature, and the primary thing that I want to emphasize is the importance that I attach to coming up with new ways where our political parties can work together more effectively. And I want to go back to the original idea that I introduced, that people should be able to vote for a different candidate for the legislature depending on who wins the race for governor. And I think that the effect of that would be to encourage more moderates in both parties to be campaigning and saying, well, look, if we're going to have a Democratic governor, you want a Republican like me to be over at the legislature counterbalancing. I think that this would be a healthy check and balance improvement in our system. So that's the thought that I'd like to leave everybody with, the thing that I started out with. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters Minneapolis, I thank the candidates for being part of the democratic process, for running for office, and for being willing to serve our community. We hope this forum has helped voters in District 61B make an informed decision with regard to the November 5th election. You can find nonpartisan information about candidates and about voting on another league website, vote.411.org. Early voting for the general election began September 20th and will end Monday, November 4th. Early voting sites can be found at the Secretary of State's website, mnvotes.gov. The video recording of this forum will be available unedited for viewing on the League of Women Voters website, LWVMpls.org. Excerpts of our edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan or political purposes. Please vote. Your vote is your voice and your power. Thank you.
Thank you.